Hey everyone, Gill Gross here, post-match. Rafael Nadal versus Darwin Blanch, Madrid 2024 first round. Nadal takes this one going away. 6-love, or actually it was 6-1, 6-love. Is this surprising that Nadal absolutely crushed the 16-year-old wild card? That's the first question I want to answer. I'll talk about what happened in the match itself. I'll talk about where this leaves Nadal as he sets up a rematch with Alex de Minaur in the second round. And then I will weigh into the debate around Darwin Blanch's wild card in the first place. Should he have gotten it? Was that appropriate for the Madrid tournament organizers to give the IMG client in Darwin Blanch a wild card? Because let's be honest, I mean, Blanch is not an established tour level player. The reason he got a wild card was because of how highly they think of him as a future client. And, you know, he's shown some of that with tremendous junior results, but it's because he's an IMG client. Let's not get it twisted. So let's talk about that at the end of the video. But first, again, first question, is it surprising? I'm not going to sit here and act like, you know, duh, everybody, you know, could have known this before, because there's a certain mystery that is attached to Nadal in general right now. Given his track record, the fact that he hasn't been able to stay healthy this year, the fact that we haven't seen him all that much in general this year, you don't really fully know what you're going to get. So there's that factor. And then Darwin Blanch, kind of an unknown, right? You still just don't really know who he is right now. You haven't seen him play these matches. That said, if you strip all that away and you look at the meat and potatoes of what we're dealing with here, then no, it's not surprising. Darwin Blanch has had incredibly impressive results at the junior level. The fact that he's made 2 Junior Slam semifinals, and he did that last year, and I didn't check his birthday, but I don't know if he was 15 or if he was 16. But regardless, the fact that he had a couple years left in the juniors still, and he's already making deep runs at the slams, suggests that he is really in a great place in comparison to other players in his age group. He's one of the elite players in his age group. And he plays at a renowned academy, Juan Carlos Ferrero Academy, and IMG, the smart tennis people at IMG Academy, whose job it is to evaluate talent and then basically make it so that IMG is signing players, is getting into business with players who are going to end up being really good pros. You know, those people who are smart tennis people feel that he's going to be a factor. So all that means quite a bit to me. He also, I think, played a really respectable match against Tomas Machac in Miami. Machac is going to be a player who I think will finish this year in the top 30, and he lost 6-4, 6-2 to him in his tour debut. So all that is awesome. But then here's where you go the other way. Blanch has played 7 15K events this year. He has only made a deep run in 2 of them. All right? So at the lowest level of the senior tour, the lowest level of the ITFs, Darwin Blanch hasn't cleaned up by any means. It's a challenge for him to play at that level. He's got a loss against 521 in the world, a loss against 496, 558, 462, 576, 650. Man, that's his brother. So, he's 16. That's where he's at right now. Rafa Nadal, let's have some respect for even what he's done this year. Yeah, he hasn't been able to play healthy, but when he's been on court, he continues to play a highly respectable level of senior tour level professional tennis, right? And this is a completely different thing. The gap between juniors and seniors is enormous. The gap between 15Ks and tour level events, not as big as juniors to seniors, but still very, very big. And look, Nadal has beaten Dominic Thiem, has beaten Jason Kubler, has beaten Flavio Caboli. Those 3 wins are 3 wins that are better than anything that Darwin Blanch has done in his career so far. served for the match against Jordan Thompson. Had chances in a first set against top 10 player Alex de Minaur. Well, really, he's 11 in the world, but still. All right? So come on now. You really look at it, what we're dealing with here, 6-1, 6-0, is not surprising at all. What happened in the match, I thought Nadal's forehand was a real presence once again, and I've felt this way for most of his matches this year, but it seemed very evident to me that two things were happening in this match. One, that Darwin Blanch didn't have the movement or the defensive capabilities to be able to absorb the weight of shot or the blows delivered off of the Nadal forehand. So there was very little chance that Blanch had to really fend off Nadal's best punches, so to speak, off of that wing. But I think even more significant was the intimidation factor. Blanch just seemed a little bit scared of Nadal's forehand, and that was making him miss a lot, which was the main factor in the match. The main thing was consistency from the back of the court and the errors that were coming off of Blanch's racket. And it just looked like, yes, it's a huge moment for Darwin. You know, he's in a big stadium. He's playing Nadal, and there were probably a lot of emotions, and there was probably a lot of jittery excitement that he was feeling at the time. And I think that, combined with the idea that he felt he needed to redline his game, led to just a lot of errors, right? Like, first game of the match, Darwin Blanch hit 3 balls, center of the strings, feet under him, and he missed. So how do you make an error when you hit the ball clean and you're on balance and your footwork is solid? When all these things are good and you still made an error, it means that whatever you were trying to do with the ball was overly ambitious. It means that your targets were probably too small and you were likely trying to redline your pace. And there seemed to be an emphasis for Blanch on, really just trying to blast forehands, where I felt he could have been well served to just look to spread the court more, take some juice out of the ball, focus on achieving some width on his cross-court forehand. But I just felt, I got the sense that he felt like every ball needed to be great, which is normal and frankly relatable. I think across a lot of levels, even like college players, recreational players have probably felt that at some point. You are playing someone better than you. You know you're playing someone better than you. Maybe you're playing someone who in some ways intimidates you. And as a result, you feel like every ball you hit needs to be great. What normally happens when you play that way is you miss a ton. Darwin Blanch missed a ton. Now, in some ways, Blanch might have been kind of right that every ball did need to be great. That desperation to constantly dictate is, maybe partially born out of the idea that you're intimidated by his level as a player, or his level, even just if you zoom in on a certain shot, you could say he's intimidated by the level that Nadal brings off of his forehand. But it's also grounded in a reality, potentially, that, my movement is so limited that I really do need to dictate play or I'm in trouble. So that's the breakdown for Darwin Blanch. I know that I've talked more about Blanch and less about what Nadal was actually doing, but let's be honest, the fact that Blanch was missing left and right and offering up a steady diet of errors was all based on these factors. And that was the main difference in the match. 5+ rallies were 21-7 in favor of Nadal. I thought the main source of success for Blanch was off of his first serve, which is very big, highly impressive for a 16-year-old. But then after that, it was all Rafa. So where does this leave Nadal? Well, look, the pattern continues. He's been able to beat a lot of guys quickly and easily. Blanch is yet another opponent, and this has happened a couple times this year, where he missed too much to really test Nadal physically. The stat that I gave out on Monday Match Analysis last week still stands. Nadal is undefeated in matches that are under an hour and a half this year. He's 4-0. He is 0-2 in matches that go past an hour and a half. So now it's the same thing as Barcelona, right? You have an opponent in de Minaur who does trust his legs, who can absorb Nadal's some of Nadal's kind of forehand firepower, can run into his backhand corner and defend that wing. And as a result, he can extend rallies and he can play a more consistent brand of tennis from the baseline. Can make things physical. Nadal played a quick match. That's going to help his recovery. But another thing to keep in mind as we track Rafa Nadal's physical progress is the added challenge that comes with playing a second round match, a third round match, a fourth match. It just gets harder and harder and harder. So there's not only the match length factor, there's also the tournament run length factor. And these are all going to be things that are sort of unknown territory for Nadal in terms of his ability to continue to win. Now, I think that he's going to push a little harder physically than he was able to in Barcelona because this is his second go-around. And I think that's going to be liberating for Rafa. The fact that he tested his body last week, he's got another match under his belt this week, and assuming that he came out of last week's de Minaur match feeling pretty good physically, I think it will probably give him some more confidence to push his body a little bit harder. That's my sense. We'll see if it plays out that way or not. But ultimately, it's going to come down to, I think, Nadal's ability to engage in that physical war that de Minaur is likely going to be able to drag him into in some capacity. It's going to determine his ability to win, but I think he'll be competitive against de Minaur again. I just think he'll be competitive for a longer period of time because in Barcelona, he was only competitive for one set. He got worn down physically. So I think he'll come in with a better effort this time. Let's talk about the wild card thing to finish. I am not a huge fan of the fact that an agency owns a tournament and takes care of their clients with a wild card. It doesn't feel right to me. It feels like the kind of thing that would never happen in any other sport. Like this sort of conflict of interest out in the open where like where you're having players getting preferential treatment because it's a massive conflict, right? And it's not the only good thing about this conflict of interest is it's such an obvious one that we all know it's there and in a way that makes it a little bit more acceptable. But I don't love it. And I think that it would be pretty reasonable if the tours came up with a rule that said you can't, and look, it's hard because then what if there's an IMG client who actually fits the criteria of a player who would ordinarily get a wild card? But if they can figure out a way to avoid the blatant, just the IMG player gets a wild card, I think that would be nice because it doesn't really feel right. Now, there's a couple of other things. First of all, don't lie to yourself about how you felt about this match before it happened. Because there were a lot. Look, Darwin Blanch is interesting for a multitude of reasons. And this match did get a lot of attention. And it did do great numbers on social. Come on now. You know it. And it wasn't just because of Nadal. And look, Pedro Martinez was probably the main guy who didn't get a wild card for Madrid that everybody felt bad about. Because he's Spanish. He is, just outside the top 50 right now. And he just missed the cutoff. He wasn't in qualifying range for the event when the cutoff hit, but he is now. So you'd think a Spaniard who is at that place in the rankings certainly should get a wild card. But do I think that Pedro Martinez versus Nadal, let's just say hypothetically, would have actually created the amount of attention and interest that Darwin Blanch versus Rafa Nadal did? I actually don't. Now, Martinez would have gotten more than one game and would have probably given Nadal a decent match, but in terms of like all the other stuff, no, like Darwin Blanch is a worthy wild card in the respect that you do have that novelty factor and he is interesting. And that is where I know what you're saying. Like, who cares about all that stuff? Who cares about social media? To which I'd say, you don't understand wild cards then. If you think that wild cards are about who is going to have the best chance to make a deep run in the tournament, well, that's never how it's been. That's never how wild cards have worked. And if you just pay attention week to week to week to who is getting the wild cards, it's always who is going to generate the maximum amount of interest. That's who gets wild cards, period. Always. I actually don't have a problem with that because I feel like I'm a realist. And as long as wild cards are up to the discretion of the tournament, of course they're going to do what's in their best interest, financially, putting on the most intriguing tournament possible. Because there are cases in which certain wild cards will help sell tickets or something like that. So that's how it's going to be. I just think the IMG thing is an additional conflict of interest because everybody has an interest, like every tournament has an interest in maximizing business. But I think sometimes the IMG conflict can be, well, this isn't necessarily in the tournament's best interest. It's actually in IMG's best interest. And that to me feels like a step too far. Selfishly, the one thing that I do like about wild cards is they do create a debate topic. They do create discourse. And I know that might sound like a little weird, but tennis really lacks discourse like this. Like if you're a fan of the UFC, the entire half of UFC media is debating who should fight who. What fights should they make? Is this smart that they made that fight? Is it not smart? And then if you look at the other sports, the team sports, a lot of it's transactions. What free agent should they sign? Was that a good trade? Was that a dumb trade? Tennis has so few opportunities to create these external, outside of the court itself, outside of the matches itself, debates that I feel like wild cards are one of those rare things that give us as tennis consumers a chance to, mix it up, have some disagreements, and talk about stuff that maybe isn't so central to forehands and backhands. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.